On November 14, 2023, a man was found dead under mysterious circumstances in room 612 of the Grand Alexandria Hotel, Egypt. That man was Adnan Farouq, a known missile broker linked to Hamas, whose death would ignite global suspicion and silent panic. Hotel staff discovered his lifeless body sprawled beside a half-finished espresso, eyes open, skin pale yet calm. No signs of struggle. The door was locked from inside. The surveillance cameras on his floor, mysteriously, had gone dark between 2:03 and 2:37 a.m. Within hours, Egyptian intelligence sealed off the room, confiscated all electronics, and ordered silence from employees. Guests on the same floor were quietly relocated. One whispered that men in dark suits entered the room before dawn, carrying sealed black cases. By noon, journalists gathered outside the hotel gates, shouting questions. Local police called it a medical emergency, but rumors swirled faster than official statements. Adnan was known in Gaza's black market as the engineer's shadow, the man who moved guidance chips across borders unseen. To some, his death meant justice. To others, it was the prelude to a larger game. Something invisible had shifted that morning in Alexandria, an operation too clean, too precise, and too rehearsed to be an accident or coincidence. By the following day, regional intelligence channels lit up. Messages marked urgent passed through encrypted lines between Tel Aviv, Cairo, Doha, and Ankara. The death of Adnan Farouq was not just an isolated event. It was a seismic tremor beneath the surface of the Middle East. Farouq had been under surveillance for years. Western analysts believed he was the invisible artery connecting Iranian weapons factories to Hamas's underground rocket labs in Rafah. His disappearance, therefore, risked disrupting a clandestine supply chain that governments pretended not to see. Inside Israel's security establishment, there was quiet satisfaction, though no one spoke it aloud. Mossad's internal memo, labeled Operation Black Thread, Phase Omega, had reportedly been closed just hours before his death. Coincidence or conclusion? No one outside the vault knew for sure. Egyptian officials feared the diplomatic fallout. If Mossad had acted on Egyptian soil without clearance, it would humiliate Cairo. Yet to acknowledge it publicly would expose the depth of foreign infiltration already tolerated in Alexandria's corridors of luxury. International media swarmed, headlines clashed, assassination or accident, theories multiplied, poisoning, induced heart failure, electromagnetic interference. Each explanation seemed both impossible and inevitable. Behind every claim, unseen hands pulled invisible strings. And in that tangled web, nations measured each other's silence as carefully as their words. Who had wanted Adnan Farouq dead, and why now? Was it Israel, avenging years of missile terror? Or was it an internal betrayal, a deal turned sour in the labyrinth of arms smuggling that stretched from Port Sudan to the tunnels of Rafah? Could Mossad have operated deep inside Egyptian territory without detection? Did Cairo quietly permit the strike to maintain its fragile peace with Tel Aviv? Or was the hit an unsanctioned message, a silent warning to those who thought themselves untouchable behind foreign passports? How did Farouq's killers bypass every layer of hotel security, erase digital traces, and vanish before sunrise? What technology could leave no footprint, no poison, no fiber, and yet end a life with surgical precision? And most haunting of all, who replaced him? For in the world of espionage, no death ends the game. Each fallen figure creates a vacuum, and power, like gravity, demands to be filled. The truth, buried beneath diplomatic denials and classified archives, was already dissolving into myth. But for those who understood the shadows, one fact was certain. Adnan Farouq's death was not the end of a story. It was the beginning of a revelation. Adnan Farouq was born on March 18, 1978, in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza Strip, a city carved by poverty, resilience, and perpetual tension. His father, Mahmoud Farouq, was a mathematics teacher dismissed after refusing to cooperate with occupying forces. His mother, Samira, sold olives in the local market. The family's small apartment stood near the old refugee camp, its walls riddled with cracks from past bombings. As a child, Adnan grew accustomed to the sound of drones overhead, the curfews, and the constant counting of hours until electricity returned. Yet he rarely spoke. He preferred dismantling old radios, sketching their circuits on paper scavenged from school notebooks. Neighbors remembered him as the quiet boy with the stare. He avoided football matches and street fights, often found on rooftops tinkering with wires, batteries, and scavenged antennas. His curiosity seemed harmless then, just another boy trying to understand a world that never made sense. By age 16, he was fluent in Arabic, Hebrew, and English. Thanks to smuggled textbooks and late-night broadcasts, he decoded from shortwave frequencies. His teachers called him gifted, but distracted. He could solve algebraic puzzles in seconds, yet his essays always returned to one theme: survival through innovation. When his father was detained in 1994, something hardened within him. Adnan stopped attending school. He began frequenting the scrapyards near Rafah, trading repair work for food and spare parts. He built crude transmitters that reached across borders, transmitting fragments of intercepted military chatter, a secret game he never confessed. By 19, he was already moving between Gaza and Egypt through tunnels known only to smugglers. What began as curiosity turned into livelihood. Radios became weapons, antennas became guidance systems, and a boy once obsessed with signals learned to speak the secret language of war. His family believed he was studying in Cairo. In truth, he was studying something far more dangerous: the art of invisibility in a world that watched everything. The young man from Khan Yunis had stepped beyond survival. He was learning how to rewrite the equations of power. Adnan Farouq's ideology did not emerge from fiery sermons or party manifestos. It was born in silence, shaped by humiliation, occupation, and the mathematics of revenge. He believed that power existed not in speeches, but in precision, in the invisible equations that determined life and death from afar. He distrusted politics and despised politicians. To him, both Israel and Hamas were mirror reflections, systems built to preserve dominance, not justice. Yet he leaned toward Hamas pragmatically, seeing in their network a vehicle to test his ideas. He provided tools, not dogma. His loyalty was to efficiency. Adnan kept meticulous notebooks filled with formulae, circuit diagrams, and coded sketches of missile guidance mechanisms. Each page bore strange annotations, quotes from Sufi poets beside ballistic coefficients. He prayed only occasionally, but when he did, he recited quietly, as if conversing with logic itself rather than a deity. He had habits that unsettled even his comrades. He never ate in groups, refused alcohol, and demanded that his workspace remain untouched. He collected broken watches, claiming each represented a life stopped prematurely by war. His colleagues called him obsessive. He called himself disciplined. Despite his cold precision, Adnan could be unexpectedly kind. He tutored neighborhood children in mathematics and electronics, paying their families in batteries or radio parts. Yet beneath that generosity lay calculation, each act another layer of camouflage for a man already designing his own legend. To outsiders, he appeared detached. To those who knew him, he was a storm contained in a whisper. Among smugglers, Adnan Farouq was known as Al-Muhandis Al-Khaf, the hidden engineer. The name surfaced first in 2008, whispered through encrypted radio chatter after a shipment of modified Iranian rockets reached Gaza without a single customs trace. To his associates, the title was both admiration and warning. Within Hamas's engineering wing, he earned another name, the Shadow of the Engineer, a reference to Yahya Ayyash, the bomb maker assassinated by Mossad in 1996. Adnan wore that comparison with quiet pride, though he never admitted it. He saw himself not as a soldier, but as a mathematician of destruction. In rare interviews with trusted intermediaries, he described his mission as balancing the scales of power through precision. He believed technology could equalize oppression. That knowledge was the only weapon no army could disarm. He never smiled when he said it. To those beneath him, he was distant, but exacting. To those above him, indispensable, yet dangerous. Adnan cultivated mystery deliberately, erasing digital trails, changing aliases monthly, and never sleeping twice in the same room abroad. He viewed his anonymity not as concealment, but as immortality. For in the world he built, legends could not die. Adnan Farouq's transition from technician to militant began almost by accident. In 2001, after a series of Israeli air raids destroyed several Gaza workshops, he was approached by intermediaries from Hamas's Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades. They sought expertise, not ideology, someone who could repair the remnants of confiscated missile components. At first, he accepted for money. His task was mechanical: rewire guidance chips, recalibrate fuses, and reverse engineer fragments from foreign munitions. Yet as months passed, something shifted. Each successful reconstruction felt like an act of retribution. Each explosion a response written in equations instead of slogans. He learned to move under assumed identities, crossing into Egypt disguised as a generator merchant, returning through Rafah tunnels with parts hidden inside oil drums. His designs soon attracted the attention of Iran's Quds Force advisors, who saw in him a valuable link between theory and field application. By 2006, Adnan was not merely fixing weapons, he was designing them. His modifications extended the range of locally produced rockets from 12 to 30 kilometers, altering the strategic calculus of the conflict. Within Hamas, this achievement transformed him from contractor to asset. He refused formal rank, avoiding meetings, ceremonies, and photographs. Power, he said, should remain unseen. When asked why he never joined political councils, he replied, "Politics needs faces. War needs ghosts." That statement circulated within intelligence briefings years later, an omen of his future. Thus began his life in the shadows, a man without a flag, serving a cause he half believed in, building machines he fully understood. And in that paradox lay his destiny. Between 2007 and 2009, Adnan Farouq's name began surfacing in regional intelligence reports under aliases like Abu Khaled al-Muhandis and Farid Omar. He was implicated in the theft of radar components from a storage facility near Port Said, a crime that embarrassed both Egyptian and foreign security contractors. The following year, Egyptian police raided a warehouse in El Arish and discovered circuit boards, capacitors, and high-precision gyroscopes marked with serial numbers from European defense firms. Among the documents recovered was a notebook filled with mathematical notations in Adnan's handwriting. Yet he vanished days before the raid. Interpol issued a red notice for international arms smuggling and trafficking of dual-use technology. Hamas denied all association, claiming he was a civilian technician. But within Gaza, his legend deepened. Those who once dismissed him as a reclusive tinkerer now treated him with wary reverence. Adnan's first known arrest occurred in 2010 in northern Sinai. Egyptian state security detained him for unauthorized possession of restricted telecommunications equipment. He remained silent throughout interrogation, signing statements in broken Arabic to conceal his Gazan origin. 3 months later, he was inexplicably released, rumored to have been traded for intelligence cooperation. Upon his return, Adnan abandoned civilian cover altogether. He relocated to Alexandria, where he established a front company importing industrial batteries from Eastern Europe. The enterprise became a conduit for smuggling components hidden within legitimate shipments. By the end of 2011, Western intelligence considered him a logistical architect rather than a simple arms courier. For Adnan Farouq, crime had evolved into vocation, and vocation into strategy. His ascent was no longer accidental, it was engineered. Adnan Farouq's second arrest occurred in 2013, under far graver circumstances. Egyptian authorities, acting on Israeli intelligence, captured him in a dawn raid near Marsa Matruh. The official charge cited espionage and illegal possession of military-grade electronics. He was taken to an undisclosed detention center south of Cairo. For 6 months, he disappeared. When he resurfaced through intermediaries, reports described torture sessions involving electric shocks and sensory deprivation. Yet, his interrogators failed to break him. Those who later examined his debrief statements said he responded to every accusation with calculations, listing missile angles, wind patterns, and error margins instead of names. Upon release, allegedly through a clandestine prisoner exchange, Adnan emerged changed. Witnesses said he spoke less and moved with mechanical precision, as though pain had been converted into algorithm. His beliefs hardened, his compassion evaporated. He began to treat ideology as machinery, cold and exact. Rumors circulated that during imprisonment, he made a vow to never again be captured alive. To ensure that, he embedded kill switch circuits in his devices and cyanide ampules in his luggage. In his mind, captivity was no longer an option. Only invisibility or annihilation remained. After his release in 2014, Adnan Farouq resurfaced in Gaza under a new alias, Khalid Nasruddin. By then, his reputation had reached the leadership of the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades. They invited him to consult on long-range missile development, a task he accepted with his characteristic detachment. He soon realized that working under a rigid hierarchy limited his innovation. Commanders demanded results, not refinement. Frustrated by bureaucracy, he began assembling a covert network of technicians, engineers, and smugglers who operated outside the movement's official structure. This group would later be known in intelligence reports as the Spiral Unit. The Spiral Unit specialized in sourcing missile guidance systems, inertial sensors, and composite casings from Eastern Europe through shell companies registered in Cyprus and Romania. Adnan coordinated shipments using encrypted frequencies disguised as maritime weather updates. Each success deepened his sense of invincibility. In 2016, Hamas's military wing officially recognized his value, but refused to formalize his position. That suited him. He preferred being indispensable, yet untraceable, a ghost moving between factions. Through secret meetings in Beirut and Port Sudan, he brokered deals that linked Iranian suppliers with Gazan engineers, creating a shadow economy of precision death. By 2018, intelligence agencies classified him as a non-aligned operative, one who served Hamas's objectives but pursued his own vision of deterrence. The Spiral Unit had evolved into a self-sustaining network, accountable to no government, no ideology, and no border. Adnan Farouq had crossed a threshold. He was no longer a component in another man's plan. He was the architect of a silent empire built on mathematics, fear, and metal. Between 2018 and 2020, Adnan Farouq's operations expanded beyond weapons. His network began trafficking specialists, scientists, radar technicians, and chemical engineers willing to sell expertise to the highest bidder. He moved them like contraband, disguised as maritime contractors or aid workers crossing borders with falsified UN documentation. Israeli intelligence intercepted fragments of communication referring to Project Asterion, an initiative believed to involve the smuggling of cryogenic propellants through the Sinai Peninsula. Analysts traced multiple explosions in unmarked warehouses to his experiments in fuel stabilization. To the outside world, they were accidents. Inside the Spiral Unit, they were rehearsals. His ambitions grew darker after an incident in Benghazi, where a rival broker allegedly withheld payment. The man was found hanged in his hotel room, his phone erased, his bank account drained. Local police ruled it suicide. Intelligence analysts disagreed. It bore Adnan's precision, clean, mathematical, irreversible. By 2019, Farouq's smuggling routes connected 4 continents. He operated through layers of shell companies, each dissolved after 2 transactions. He used prepaid satellites, one-time encryption pads, and biometric disguises to evade border scans. For every shipment intercepted, 2 others reached Gaza without trace. Egyptian and European agencies began linking his network to disappearances of informants, engineers, and middlemen. None could be proven, but all shared the same signature: silence. The once reclusive engineer had evolved into something far colder, a logistician of fear. Adnan Farouq no longer built devices. He built systems. Systems that could operate even in his absence. Systems that, like him, learned to vanish perfectly. January 2019, Port Sudan. A freighter named Al-Sharq Dawn docked under false paperwork. Inside its steel containers were industrial compressors, each concealing disassembled rocket engines. Adnan's men supervised the offload at night, bribing port inspectors with cash wired from a Cyprus account. The cargo disappeared inland by dawn. April 2020, Rafah border. Egyptian security forces intercepted a convoy carrying fertilizers and copper tubing. 2 smugglers were arrested. Both carried forged passports bearing European holograms. Interrogation revealed the convoy's organizer used a digital codename, M62 Delta. Intelligence later confirmed it was one of Adnan's internal call signs. August 2021, Tripoli, Lebanon. Surveillance footage captured a meeting between Adnan and a Hezbollah logistics officer in a dim seaside cafe. They discussed new navigation software for short-range rockets. 2 days later, the cafe burned in an unexplained electrical fire. Both men escaped, but the laptop containing transaction logs vanished. February 2022, Istanbul. Turkish authorities quietly detained a Jordanian courier carrying encrypted microchips intended for Gaza. Embedded metadata on his phone pointed to emails routed through an Alexandria-based company called Delta Wave Industries, one of Adnan's front firms. The courier died en route to interrogation after suffering a sudden cardiac arrest. July 2023, Alexandria. Adnan checked into the Grand Alexandria Hotel under the alias Sami Nasser. His arrival triggered surveillance pings across multiple intelligence grids. Mossad's algorithms, trained to identify travel anomalies, marked his presence as a Level 7 priority. What followed would end 2 decades of pursuit. Each event, dissected by analysts later, revealed a single truth. Every step brought Adnan closer to perfection, and to the operation that would finally erase him. By late 2020, Adnan Farouq's name appeared across multiple international threat assessments. Israel's Shin Bet placed him on its Category Red list, labeling him a non-military strategic actor enabling sustained rocket proliferation. The CIA referred to him in internal briefings as Broker X. His existence became synonymous with precision terror. Western intelligence agencies viewed him as a hybrid threat, neither terrorist nor businessman, but something in between. He supplied tools that extended the reach of militancy far beyond Gaza. His shipments circumvented sanctions, redefined smuggling methodologies, and exposed vulnerabilities in international maritime oversight. His influence was measurable only in aftermaths, each missile that struck without warning, each system that functioned despite embargo. By 2021, Israel and its allies coordinated a multi-agency task force, codename Operation Black Thread. The objective: map, intercept, and neutralize the logistics web surrounding Adnan Farouq. Cyber units traced his shell companies across 7 countries. Financial trackers flagged transfers through Dubai, Odessa, and Athens. Yet every lead dissolved. He was always 2 steps ahead, deleting footprints before they formed. Egypt, too, viewed him as a liability. His cross-border dealings jeopardized fragile peace accords and embarrassed intelligence officials who had overlooked his presence for years. Quietly, Cairo added him to its own internal blacklist, authorizing detention or neutralization under emergency security clauses. Despite the growing storm, Adnan remained calm. He lived in hotel rooms under rotating pseudonyms, changed SIM cards daily, and communicated through coded courier drops. He once told an associate, "The moment they name you, you have already won. They are chasing your shadow, not you." By 2023, international law enforcement formally designated him an unaffiliated weapons facilitator, placing him among the 10 most wanted non-state actors in the Middle East. Yet none could locate him precisely. For every image captured, 2 others contradicted it. He had become at last a myth the world could not verify, but could no longer ignore. The first attempt on Adnan Farouq's life occurred in February 2021, in a quiet neighborhood of Beirut. A parked sedan exploded as he exited a small electronics workshop. The blast destroyed the building's facade, killing 2 of his aides. Adnan survived, shielded by a reinforced doorway he had installed himself months earlier. No group claimed responsibility, but Israeli intelligence chatter that night spiked. The second came in October 2021, when his rented car along the Alexandria-Cairo highway was remotely disabled through a hijacked GPS module. Moments later, a drone strike obliterated the vehicle, except it was empty. Adnan had switched cars an hour before, following an intuition he could never fully explain. By mid-2022, Mossad's internal division known as Kidon intensified surveillance. They infiltrated his supply chains, substituting hardware shipments with traceable components. One such component, a microprocessor with embedded tracking firmware, led Israeli operatives to a warehouse in Port Said. The strike team arrived too late. The location was already burning, its blueprints gone. A third attempt, March 2023, unfolded in a hotel in Amman. A disguised operative posing as a foreign journalist tried to deliver a briefcase containing a binary nerve agent hidden within the foam padding. Adnan, suspicious of the weight, refused the meeting. The briefcase was later found dumped in the Jordan River, its seal never broken. Each failed attempt only deepened his paranoia and precision. He dismantled electronics before entering any room, employed decoys to occupy hotel floors, and paid former intelligence officers to monitor his own security. His routines became rituals of survival, measured, mechanical, almost sacred. To his pursuers he seemed untouchable. To those who knew the world of espionage, his survival was temporary mathematics. Every calculation, no matter how exact, carries an inevitable error. Mossad merely had to wait for the one mistake Adnan Farouq would not correct in time. By late 2023, Adnan Farouq's life had narrowed to a sequence of precautions. Every night he shifted hotels, changed passwords, burned SIM cards, and slept with a loaded pistol on the nightstand. Yet beneath the discipline, fatigue began to show. His eyes, once calculating, carried a distant tremor of resignation. Intelligence intercepts revealed he had started questioning his allies. He accused his couriers of betrayal, demanded polygraph tests for his technicians, and refused to travel by air. Those closest to him whispered that he was haunted, not by guilt, but by the mathematical certainty that his survival curve was collapsing. Some claimed he received anonymous messages, blank emails containing only latitude and longitude coordinates, always corresponding to places he had visited weeks earlier. To him, they were reminders, a game of proximity played by an unseen hunter. By November, his network was thinning. Contacts disappeared, bank accounts froze, and digital doors once open to him now returned silence. The system he had built to be immortal was quietly dismantling itself. The final equation, he once wrote, was simple. Every ghost leaves a trail, and every trail leads home. His would end in Alexandria. The death of Adnan Farouq cannot be understood without the wider storm that defined his world. The Middle East by the early 2020s had become a labyrinth of proxy wars, each conflict a reflection of another. Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen were no longer isolated battlegrounds, but nodes in a continuous web of competing agendas. For decades, Israel and Hamas had fought an asymmetric war, one side commanding satellites and drones, the other tunnels and shadows. Yet beneath that visible struggle, a second war existed, the war for technology. It was this hidden battlefield that men like Adnan Farouq inhabited, where a single circuit or microchip could alter the balance of deterrence. Iran's support for Hamas deepened after the U.S. withdrawal from parts of the region. Tehran sought to encircle Israel through arms proliferation, funding research into improvised missile systems. Farouq became a silent beneficiary of this strategy, a conduit ensuring Iranian hardware reached Gaza through Egypt and Sudan. His role symbolized the new face of regional warfare, one fought not by armies, but by networks. Meanwhile, Egypt stood precariously in the middle. Dependent on Western aid yet bound by geography to Gaza, Cairo walked a tightrope between cooperation and confrontation. The Sinai Peninsula became a smuggler's artery, impossible to close without igniting revolt. Farouq exploited this chaos with mathematical precision, knowing every checkpoint could be bought and every patrol avoided. By the time of his death, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict had evolved beyond borders. It was now a cybernetic struggle of surveillance, data interception, and targeted elimination. Adnan Farouq's story fit perfectly into this evolution. A ghost, built from circuits and codes, fighting a war without uniforms. His assassination, therefore, was not an isolated act of revenge. It was a move in a decades-long game of deterrence, an equation written in the languages of intelligence and silence. Every major player in the Middle East had a stake in Adnan Farouq's existence, or his removal. For Israel, he represented a living algorithm of destruction, a man whose engineering genius extended Hamas's reach deeper into its cities. Eliminating him was not vengeance, it was preemptive arithmetic. For years, Mossad tracked his movements, assembling fragments of his shadow until the sum became a target. Egypt's position was far more delicate. Officially, Cairo condemned all unauthorized foreign operations on its soil. Unofficially, Egyptian intelligence tolerated select infiltrations when convenient. Adnan's death in Alexandria threatened that fragile equilibrium. To admit Mossad's involvement would expose Egyptian vulnerability. To deny it risked accusations of complicity. Silence, as always, became strategy. Iran viewed Farouq as an asset worth preserving. Though not an official member of its Quds Force network, he functioned as a proxy engineer, a bridge between sanctioned laboratories and militant workshops. His disappearance disrupted logistical pipelines extending from Isfahan through Port Sudan. Within days of his death, Tehran's state media hinted at Zionist sabotage, a coded warning disguised as outrage. Qatar, which had quietly funded reconstruction in Gaza, found itself cornered diplomatically. Western intelligence briefings pointed to Doha's channels as unintentional funding routes for Farouq's operations. Qatari officials dismissed such claims, but within their private circles, his elimination was viewed as an expensive lesson in plausible deniability. Turkey's intelligence agency, MIT, maintained an ambiguous stance. They had once intercepted Adnan's couriers in Istanbul, but released them under political pressure. Ankara understood his utility as leverage, a bargaining chip in its oscillating relations with both Hamas and Israel. Each nation in its own way had touched the current that powered Adnan Farouq's empire. When it finally short-circuited in that Alexandria hotel room, none claimed responsibility. Yet every government, in silence, calculated the same outcome. One less unpredictable variable in a region built entirely on volatility. Adnan Farouq mattered because he personified the future of asymmetric warfare. He was not a general commanding soldiers, nor a politician issuing decrees. He was an architect of capability, a single man whose mind could shift the balance of deterrence without firing a single shot. In a region dominated by ideologies, Adnan represented pragmatism weaponized. He did not act for faith or flag, but for equilibrium. His designs allowed militias with crude resources to challenge a state equipped with satellite-guided systems. Through him, the underdog discovered parity, however temporary or fragile. To intelligence analysts, he was the ghost in the algorithm, a civilian intellect that rendered conventional warfare obsolete. He also mattered because he blurred the lines of responsibility. Governments could deny funding terrorists while secretly using intermediaries like Adnan to test new forms of power projection. Every shipment he moved, every design he improved, carried signatures from multiple nations, none willing to admit participation. He was the connective tissue of covert diplomacy, the proof that enemies often collaborate beneath the surface they publicly scorch. His elimination, therefore, was not just the removal of a man, but the deletion of an equation. Without him, networks stalled, prototypes failed, and supply routes fragmented. Yet in that very fragmentation lay danger. Dozens of smaller engineers rose to fill his void, each lacking his discipline but inheriting his ambition. To historians, Adnan Farouq's life became a case study in modern espionage. How knowledge transcends ideology, how intellect becomes contraband, and how one human mind can haunt the machinery of global power. When Mossad's final operation ended his life, it did not erase his influence, it merely confirmed it. His death proved that the battlefield had already moved beyond borders and bullets, into the unseen geometry of those who think in silence. In early November 2023, 3 operatives landed separately at Borg El Arab International Airport under assumed identities. Their travel records later revealed a pattern of precision, too exact to be coincidental. One arrived from Zurich, another from Larnaca, and the third from Addis Ababa, each carrying forged European passports, each arriving within a 4-hour window. Their mission file, classified under Operation Black Thread, Phase Omega, had been in preparation for nearly 6 months. Surveillance teams in Tel Aviv had tracked Adnan Farouq's movements through banking anomalies, room service requests, and encrypted hotel Wi-Fi connections. Every transaction he made was mirrored in a sandbox network Mossad had built specifically for him. Upon arrival, the agents followed strict compartmentalization protocols. They did not meet directly, communicated only through coded text embedded in image metadata, and lodged in different hotels across Alexandria. The first operative, posing as an Italian art dealer, secured access to the Grand Alexandria's executive floor by renting a corner suite. The second, under the guise of a German logistics consultant, rented a storage unit near the Corniche, later found to contain surveillance gear and falsified maintenance uniforms. The third operative, a woman identified posthumously only by the alias Yael 9, entered Egypt with diplomatic clearance under a temporary cultural mission. She was the mission's coordinator, fluent in Arabic, and trained in the manipulation of environmental toxins. Their combined dossier, later reconstructed by investigators, showed no mention of Adnan Farouq's name. Instead, the target was simply labeled Subject Delta 12, High Cognitive Asset, Priority Termination, Natural Cause Protocol. The hunters were in position. The countdown had begun. By November 10, 2023, the Grand Alexandria Hotel had unknowingly become the stage for a silent war. The operatives' check-ins were executed with mechanical precision. Each used different online booking platforms routed through proxy servers in Tallinn and Bucharest, ensuring no digital overlap. Their identities appeared authentic, complete with social media footprints and corporate email histories fabricated months in advance. Operative 1, the Italian art dealer, spent his days frequenting the hotel's rooftop cafe, photographing architectural details. In truth, his camera contained a micro-lens transmitting live feeds of the 6th floor corridor, where room 612, Adnan Farouq's suite, was located. Operative 2 posed as a logistics consultant attending an import conference. His briefcase housed a frequency jammer capable of disabling wireless routers and CCTV systems within a 30-meter radius for 34 minutes. Yael 9 operated in plain sight. She attended gallery receptions, hosted polite dinners, and chatted with hotel staff in fluent Arabic. To them, she was elegant, curious, harmless. In reality, she had bribed a night shift supervisor, gaining access to master keycards and maintenance schedules. Every night she mapped the building's routines, security rotations, camera blind spots, and the pattern of Adnan's room service requests. 2 days before the operation, they ran a dry rehearsal. During the blackout interval, the team synchronized their watches to OR 2.0 Cairo time, confirming the jammer's range, exit routes, and elevator timings. Their report was sent through a one-time encrypted satellite burst, then the transmitter self-destructed chemically. By November 13th, everything was aligned: logistics, timing, and cover identities. Adnan Farouq, oblivious but cautious, had ordered an espresso and 2 bottles of mineral water before retiring for the night. The hunters were waiting just beyond the veil of normalcy, where luxury met precision and time prepared to stop. November 14th, 2023, 0:47 a.m. The night over Alexandria was calm, veiled in coastal mist. Inside room 612, Adnan Farouq was reviewing encrypted schematics on his tablet, unaware that the system had already been breached. A silent update had infiltrated his device hours earlier, planted through the hotel's Wi-Fi network, a digital needle waiting for command activation. 1:18 a.m. Operative 2 activated the frequency jammer from the storage unit across the street. Within seconds, all cameras on the 6th floor flickered and froze. Security guards, assuming routine interference, logged the outage but took no action. The clock was ticking, the blackout window precisely 34 minutes. 1:21 a.m. Yael 9, wearing a maintenance uniform, entered through the service corridor carrying a sealed tray marked Late Order, Room 612. Inside the tray's base lay a microvial containing a neuroinhibitor, odorless, colorless, engineered to mimic cardiac arrest within 10 minutes of ingestion. She knocked once, softly. Adnan, cautious but expecting no threat, opened the door halfway. She smiled, murmured a simple apology about a delivery mix-up, and placed the tray on the table. He nodded distractedly, his eyes still fixed on the tablet's blue glow. She exited wordlessly, her reflection briefly captured in the elevator's mirror. A ghost passing through routine. 01:28 a.m. Adnan poured an espresso, stirred it twice, and resumed reading. The compound activated upon contact with heat, dissolving entirely within seconds. 01:36 a.m. His heart rate accelerated sharply, then collapsed into silence. He slumped forward, the tablet slipping from his hands. No struggle, no sign of intrusion, only stillness. 01:41 a.m. Operative 1 stationed on the rooftop cafe confirmed visual confirmation of target termination through infrared scope. Code phrase transmitted. Thread cut. 01:45 a.m. The jammer disengaged. Cameras resumed normal operation. Maintenance logs showed no anomalies. 02:00 a.m. All operatives began exfiltration sequences using separate taxis to predetermined safe houses. Within 6 hours, each would depart Egypt under different passports, their digital identities already dissolving into cybernetic dust. The world slept, unaware that another equation had just been solved in silence. The operation combined tradecraft, technical intrusion, and human manipulation into a single, silent instrument. Electronic penetration teams used bespoke malware to create a transient backdoor into the hotel's guest network, enabling remote reconnaissance without persistent traces. Surveillance packages included microlenses disguised as camera equipment and long-range optical scopes for confirmation at night. Communications relied on ephemeral channels. One-time pads embedded in innocuous image files, encrypted bursts via satellite relays, and time-limited SIMs that self-destructed in software after transmission. For physical access, the team employed expertly forged credentials and maintenance uniforms, supported by social engineering, aimed at night shift staff to exploit predictable hospitality rhythms. Counter-surveillance measures were layered. The operatives used commercially plausible decoys, tourists, consultants, and diplomats, to create noise. They routed movements through third-party logistics companies and arranged for legitimate-looking deliveries to mask contraband. Safe houses contained Faraday-lined rooms and burnable evidence caches designed to leave investigators with artifacts, not answers. Medical subtleties were preferred over spectacle. The chosen method produced symptoms consistent with natural cardiac failure, limiting autopsy certainty and easing diplomatic denials. Forensics teams later noted how the lack of trauma, absence of residue, and tightly timed physiological collapse suggested a deliberate, knowledge-driven intervention rather than an improvised attack. Physical tools were matched by bureaucratic instruments, shell companies, fabricated travel histories, and financial layering through multiple jurisdictions. The operation's architecture was as much legal and administrative as it was kinetic, paperwork engineered to outlast digital trails. Together, these tools formed a choreography of absence. Each element reduced visible fingerprints while increasing plausible deniability. It was not merely about killing a man. It was about making a death seem inevitable and unprovable, an act of statecraft disguised as misfortune. Night in Alexandria tightened like a held breath as operatives moved through hotel veins, shadows on marble, rehearsed motions. A waiter nearly discovered the maintenance tray. He paused, inspected, then walked away. One misstep would have detonated the entire plan. On the rooftop, Operative 1 adjusted an infrared scope at 01:41, his gloved hand trembling minutely from caffeine and fear. He watched a single window, room 6I12. For 30 seconds the target shifted in the light, then stillness returned again. Yael 9 moved with courteous speed, the maintenance uniform a perfect script. She passed two staffers, greeted them, and smiled. Both thought her actions polite and routine. In the corridor, her pulse synced with a hidden metronome, each step measured. Operative 2, from his disguised storage unit, monitored signal strength graphs and the jammer's battery curve. At 01:18, the blackout began. He noted a 34-minute window and prayed, only figuratively, to anonymity. He logged timestamps with ceremonial coldness and clinical precision. Close calls threaded the night. A housekeeping cart delayed. An inquisitive guest returning for a coat. a city power surge. Each anomaly could have unstitched the plan, yet each one instead folded into the operation with practiced inevitability and silence. At 1:36 a.m., Adnan Farouq collapsed quietly onto his table, espresso steaming beside trembling fingers. No convulsions, no foam, only a measured exhale that became silence. The neuroinhibitor acted like a phantom surgeon, precise and undetectable in its lethal choreography. Hotel staff found him minutes later, eyes open, breath cold, and an untouched cup beside his hand. They called security, who reported a presumed medical emergency. Their assessment would later be replayed in diplomatic briefings as cautious uncertainty and routine. Medical teams found no toxins on cursory tests and recorded a sudden cardiac arrest as cause of death. The lack of external markers complicated immediate prosecution. Forensic teams later faced a design crafted to mimic nature while erasing intentional signatures. The operatives staged elements to support a natural narrative: medication blister packs on the nightstand, a copy of a cardiac article, and a pillow smoothed to suggest rest. Each artifact steered investigators toward benign explanations and away from deliberate homicide. Within hours, intelligence agencies parsed travel logs, CCTV flashes, and blips. Patterns emerged only later: coordinated arrivals, synchronized blackout windows, and forged credentials. In time, the architecture of denial unraveled into traceable fragments, implicating actors who would never admit involvement. At 6:42 a.m., the Grand Alexandria Hotel's housekeeping supervisor, Mariam El Sayed, knocked on room 612 after receiving no response to wake-up calls. The door, locked from the inside, was opened with a master key. She entered to find Adnan Farouq slumped over the table, the half-finished espresso cup still warm to touch. She screamed. Security arrived within minutes, sealing the room and calling for an ambulance. Paramedics pronounced him dead at the scene, estimating the time of death between 1:30 and 2 a.m. A faint scent of coffee lingered, the only trace of normalcy in a tableau otherwise frozen in deliberate stillness. Egyptian police arrived by 7:15 a.m. They photographed the scene, logged personal effects, a tablet, 2 passports, and a phone missing its SIM card, and marked the case as sudden death under unknown circumstances. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints beyond his own. By midday, rumors had already leaked to local journalists. Hamas-linked businessman dies in hotel. Within hours, Israeli and Western intelligence bureaus intercepted internal Egyptian chatter confirming the identity. A minor hotel tragedy had just become a geopolitical storm. Outside, the sea glistened indifferently, waves lapping against the corniche as if nothing at all had happened. The autopsy began at Cairo's Forensic Medical Authority on the evening of November 14, 2023. The body of Adnan Farouq was examined under tight security, attended by Egyptian intelligence officers, and a single medical examiner cleared for classified procedures. Initial inspection revealed no bruising, puncture wounds, or chemical burns, nothing suggesting violence. Toxicology screens detected no conventional poisons, narcotics, or heavy metals. His blood contained trace amounts of caffeine and minimal ethanol, consistent with espresso consumption. Yet the pathologist noted subtle anomalies: microscopic capillary ruptures in the heart muscle and accelerated neural degradation inconsistent with ordinary cardiac arrest. When samples were forwarded to independent European laboratories, results came back inconclusive. Analysts suspected a synthetic compound designed to denature upon exposure to oxygen, leaving no chemical footprint. One report referred cryptically to engineered acetylcholinesterase disruption. Another simply called it biochemical silence. The final death certificate listed the cause as acute cardiac failure of undetermined origin. Officially, the case was closed. Unofficially, it opened more questions than it answered. Behind closed doors, Egyptian investigators quietly concluded the precision of the death excluded coincidence. Someone, somewhere, had written a perfect equation, one that killed cleanly and erased itself completely. 2 days after the death, the Grand Alexandria Hotel's management surrendered its CCTV archives to Egyptian intelligence. The footage initially appeared intact, but analysts soon discovered a precise 34-minute blackout, from 2:03 to 2:37 a.m. Cameras on every floor functioned perfectly before and after, but the sixth-floor corridor remained blank, replaced by looping static. Further inspection revealed that the digital storage system had been accessed remotely through maintenance credentials belonging to a contractor who no longer worked for the hotel. When traced, the credentials led to a defunct security firm registered in Tallinn, later linked to multiple shell corporations across Europe. The pattern mirrored known Mossad tradecraft: invisible entry, surgical tampering, silent withdrawal. Parallel to the CCTV review, immigration officers flagged anomalies in the hotel's guest registry. 3 foreign passports, Swiss, Italian, and German, shared identical holographic inconsistencies in ultraviolet light. Each had been scanned into the database within 4 hours of each other, each bearing names untraceable to any legitimate citizen registry. Interpol circulated the passport images across databases and received a startling hit. Similar templates had surfaced during a 2010 operation in Dubai, the assassination of Mahmoud al-Mabhouh, another Hamas operative. The resemblance was unmistakable. The implication politically was radioactive. When Egyptian intelligence presented the findings to the foreign ministry, officials immediately imposed a communications blackout. They feared not the truth, but the reaction. To accuse Mossad publicly would strain fragile peace accords. To remain silent would expose Cairo's inability to secure its own territory. Within days, the scandal leaked through anonymous sources. Newspapers hinted at foreign intelligence patterns, but names were omitted. The silence between nations deepened. The pattern, however, was clear. The ghost of Mahmoud al-Mabhouh had returned, rewritten, and perfected in the death of Adnan Farouq. By November 20, 2023, the story had breached containment. International headlines proclaimed, "Hamas arms broker found dead in Egyptian hotel." Western outlets speculated about a Mossad hit, while Arab media framed it as a violation of sovereignty. Egypt's foreign ministry issued a muted statement promising a comprehensive investigation. None believed it. In Tel Aviv, officials neither confirmed nor denied involvement. An anonymous Israeli security source told Haaretz, "Some fires extinguish themselves, some require a match." The ambiguity was deliberate, both admission and denial intertwined, the language of covert diplomacy. Iran condemned the killing, calling it an assassination of scientific resistance. State television broadcast grainy photos of Adnan Farouq's corpse, portraying him as a martyr of innovation. Behind the scenes, Quds Force operatives reviewed communication channels he had built, racing to salvage what remained of his smuggling networks. Cairo faced fury and quiet admiration in equal measure. Hamas accused Egypt of complicity, while Western governments praised its swift containment. Egyptian intelligence chiefs, humiliated yet pragmatic, decided to bury the story under layers of bureaucratic fog. Diplomatically, the fallout rippled far beyond Alexandria. Interpol quietly shelved its forensic inquiries. European governments tightened oversight of dual-use exports. Intelligence alliances, meanwhile, deepened under the pretext of counter-proliferation cooperation. In the months that followed, whispers circulated through espionage circles that Mossad had tested new methodologies in the operation, methods that rendered forensic confirmation impossible. No one ever officially named the assassins. No one had to. The silence between capitals, the synchronized denials, and the vanishing of every digital record spoke louder than any admission. Adnan Farouq was gone. The machinery he built lived on, absorbed, dissected, and repurposed by the very hands that erased him. Beneath every assassination lies an invisible empire, a bureaucracy without borders, housed in the corridors of ministries and the basements of embassies. Files marked confidential travel farther than soldiers, and decisions that end lives are signed not in anger, but in pen and protocol. In Tel Aviv, the operation against Adnan Farouq existed only as a reference number, case 47310, buried within the archives of Mossad's Directorate of Special Measures. The orders trail wound through diplomatic channels, codenamed task forces, and advisory committees that did not officially exist. Each signature was real, each authorization deniable. Across the sea, Egypt's internal security agencies compiled their own shadow files. Memoranda circulated quietly, stamped top secret, no distribution. They outlined the hotel's vulnerabilities, the failures of surveillance, and the probability of internal complicity. None dared attach a name to the final report. This phantom bureaucracy governed the hidden world, where legality blurred into logistics. It spoke in acronyms, sanitized language, and redacted paragraphs. It was both the weapon and the shield, the mechanism that ensured governments could kill efficiently, then discuss morality over coffee the next morning. Every nation, regardless of ideology, maintained its version of this machinery. Together, they formed an invisible parliament of silence, bound not by law, but by the shared understanding that power is never accountable when exercised in the dark. From within that unseen bureaucracy emerged the invisible legions, the hands that executed what diplomats only whispered. They moved through airports, ports, and safe houses under names that shifted weekly. Some carried passports, others carried nothing but code words and silence. Mossad's elite Kidon teams were the model, mythic even among peers. Each operative trained for years to erase identity, mastering languages, chemistry, and the art of leaving nothing behind. To foreign agencies, they were phantoms. To themselves, they were craftsmen perfecting death's quietest expression. Other nations fielded their own specters. Iran's Unit 840, Russia's Zaslan, America's Task Force Orange, each a reflection of the same doctrine: kill without footprint, deny without hesitation. They existed parallel to diplomacy, operating in the shadows of peace treaties they made irrelevant. Files described them clinically: assets, instruments, mechanisms. Yet to those who understood the trade, they were mythic archetypes, the ghosts that kept history aligned with the will of the powerful. They operated not for glory, but for continuity. Where politics failed, they intervened. Where truth threatened, they removed it. Together, these legions formed the silent architecture of global order, merciless, efficient, and eternal. History, in the underworld of espionage, does not fade. It reverberates. Each operation leaves behind an unfinished echo, a whisper that resurfaces decades later beneath new names, new codes, and new faces. The death of Adnan Farouq was not an isolated event. It was a chapter rewritten from older scripts. In 1973, Mossad agents hunted Black September operatives across Europe after the Munich massacre. One of them misidentified and killed in Lillehammer, Norway. The lesson then was discretion. The cost, exposure. In 1996, Yahya Ayyash, the bomb maker known as the Engineer, was assassinated through an explosive cell phone, a precedent that inspired the pursuit of every technical mastermind who followed. Then came Dubai 2010, when Mahmoud al-Mabhouh died in his hotel room under strikingly similar circumstances: locked door, silence, and a trail of forged passports. The pattern became doctrine: make death look administrative, clinical, unremarkable. Each mission refined the choreography. Each failure taught restraint. By the time Mossad reached Alexandria in 2023, assassination had evolved into an exact science of plausibility, where even outrage could be predicted and managed. Some say these operations are stitched together by the same architects, men and women who never retire, only change offices and code names. Their legacy is not written in medals or archives, but in ghosts who die quietly in hotel rooms. Behind every operation stand the unseen architects, the policymakers, ministers, and generals who sign invisible decrees with steady hands. They speak of national security, regional balance, and deterrence, while knowing their signatures summon death. They are the gods behind the curtain, worshipped through obedience and fear. Their world permits no innocence, only acceptable consequences. Files close, nations deny, and the machinery hums again. When the orders end, these men retreat to meetings, briefings, and family dinners, leaving ghosts behind in hotel rooms across continents. Power to them is not moral, it is mathematical, and always expendable. Adnan Farouq's body was transported quietly to Gaza, through the Rafah crossing under heavy Egyptian supervision. There were no official statements, no televised processions. His coffin, sealed in plain wood, arrived at dawn, greeted by a small convoy of Hamas officials and a crowd of silent mourners. The funeral took place in Khan Yunis, where he had been born. Neighbors lined the narrow streets, whispering his names, some in reverence, others in fear. Hamas leaders praised him as a martyr of ingenuity, while his family remained motionless, aware that even grief could draw suspicion. Israeli intelligence observed the event through drones circling beyond visibility, recording attendance lists for future reference. Western news outlets reported the burial as a minor regional event, overshadowed by larger geopolitical crises. Yet within Gaza, his death rippled through underground workshops and smuggling circles like a sudden blackout. Engineers halted their projects. Couriers went silent. Accounts were frozen. The invisible network that once obeyed Adnan's mathematical order descended into chaos. His absence was not merely emotional, it was operational. In a war fought through calculations, the loss of one mind could stall an entire machine. And that, perhaps, was the true intent of his execution. In the months following Adnan Farouq's death, his absence reshaped the clandestine balance of the region. Without his technical discipline, Hamas's weapons programs fractured into rival cells, each competing for resources, none matching his precision. Missiles still launched, but with reduced accuracy and increased risk. The era of engineered terror gave way to erratic improvisation. Iran, deprived of its quiet conduit, struggled to maintain its logistical corridors. Funding channels were rerouted through less reliable intermediaries, inviting exposure. In intelligence circles, analysts noted a measurable lull in illicit weapons transfers across the Sinai. Mossad called it operational stabilization, a coded acknowledgement that chaos itself could be containment. Within Gaza, Adnan's legend grew into mythology. His image appeared on murals beside fallen commanders, his name invoked in speeches about resistance through intellect. Yet beyond the borders, his death served a different purpose. It became a case study in modern elimination. How precision, patience, and bureaucracy could dismantle an entire infrastructure without open warfare. Years later, declassified briefings would cite the Farouq model as precedent for covert neutralization. His story lingered not in monuments, but in classified training manuals, a warning written in invisible ink that no engineer, however brilliant, is beyond reach. In the end, Adnan Farouq's death changed little in the grand architecture of geopolitics. Rockets still fell, alliances still shifted, and new names replaced old on the lists of men marked for elimination. Yet his story illuminated a truth older than espionage itself. States survive not through justice, but through secrecy. In that hidden world, morality bends to necessity, and silence becomes its own form of warfare. Adnan's fate was not tragedy, it was arithmetic. When governments play God, death becomes administrative, and the line between order and murder dissolves quietly into the shadows where truth is never welcome.